Kakadosh Boker or Daf Yomi Masechet Batra Daf Kuf Kaftet Amud Aleph 129a1. Yeah, says the Gemara. Yeah, we're by the two dots, right? We just were speaking about what's halacha. We said with the Rabbi is Musifu, the Morban Ravashi, Yilchatek Ravashi, Shmuel. He had a question. Fine. Hamchalek nechasav. We're on the two dots. Go a few lines down. Two dots. Hamchalek nechasav al piv. Imagine right now you're coming, you're dividing your properties to your children. And what happened was you went and you said one child is going to get more. You're doing everything by peh, by your mouth. And you're saying this child is going to get more. This one going to get less. This one. So it says the Gemara, what are we talking about now, the matana at the beginning? What is the lashon of the matana in the middle? Or what's the lashon of the matana at the end? What does that mean? When you're coming and you're writing it down, if you're going to write it down as a Yerusha, maybe it doesn't work. But maybe if you're writing it as a matana, it does work. But it's a present. Remember, as a present, you can do whatever you want, because it's a present. But now in the document, how is it? So he says, what happens if I write the document? It's written Yerusha, but it's also written matana. Meaning it's written both. How can it be both? So we have to find out. So says the Gemara, what does it mean that there's going to be lashon matana at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end? So Kiata Rav Dimi Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Tinaten Sadeh Ploni Leploni Virasher Zoi Matana Betchila. If you say you're going to give this property to this one and this one, and he's going to inherit it, but you first said you're going to give it, and then you said you're going to get inherited, that's called the matana was given at the beginning. If you said Yirasha, he's going to inherit it, and then you wrote Betinatenlo and give it to him. So therefore, this is called the matana was written at the end. Because the present of giving it to him was written at the end. At the beginning, it said he's going to inherit it, but then it says give it to him. If it says Betinatenlo Yirasha, Yirasha Betinatenlo Yirasha, if he says he's going to inherit it, give it to him, and he's going to inherit it, that's the matana in the middle. Meaning you see from sometimes that a person has that even in the same document, he mentioned both. So says the Gemara over there, if you remember, we said that as long as he did mention matana, doesn't matter where it was, whether it was the beginning, middle, or the end, it's a matana. It's a matana. It's also written Yerusha, yeah, but he did write down matana. So what was the case that he had matana at the beginning, matana in the middle, matana at the end? We just explained. So right, that means a person comes and they wrote down a document, it's a Yerusha, but in the middle of the will of the testament, it's also written, right, a matana. Doesn't matter where it was, the beginning, middle, and end, it's a matana. It's a present. As long as it's written once. There's the Gemara. V'davka be'adam echad v'sadeh echad. Only to the same person and the same field. But to one person in two different fields, or one field and two different people, no. Meaning, he cannot come and say that Reuven is going to take half the field as Yerusha and give the other half to Shimon. Because there, since it's talking about two different people, it's not a matana anymore, because everything's a Yerusha. Right? It's like a chalukah, but that means even though one of them he did use the terminology matana, the matana is only if in that one child, the same child and the same field, he used the terminology matana. But if it was two different children or two different fields, it's not a matana. Rabbi Lazar argues and he says, whether it's one person in two different fields or one field and two different people, it's still going to work. But if it's two fields and two different people, no, it doesn't work. So Kiata Ravin Amar. So when Ravin came to Bavel, he came and he said, right, to Bavel he said, Tinaten Sadeh Ploni leploni v'yirash Ploni Sadeh Ploni. If he says, give Sadeh Ploni to Plonit, and Yirash Ploni Sadeh Plonit, he only used Matana to one boy, and he only used Yerusha to one boy. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Kana. It is going to be Koneh. Rabbi Lazar Omer lo Kana. He didn't acquire anything. So Elmaleh Abai LeRavin says about to Ravin, Anchata lana chada, that kafta lana chada. He says one of your words we understand, the other one we don't understand. I understand Rabbi Lazar to Rabbi Lazar. It's not a question. It all depends whether it's one person with two fields or two people in two fields. We said two people with two fields. It's not good because since it's two different people, two different human beings, two different children, plus two different fields, so it doesn't work. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, we have a question. What's going on then? So it says the Gemara, many times it happens that you have the rabbi says something, and the students were on the phone, or they were, snoozing around, or they were talking. And then what happens is that they didn't realize what the rabbi really said. So you have two Amuraim saying that their rabbi said different things. So one of them comes and he says, Rabbi said A. The other one said, Rabbi said B. It's not that the Rabbi Yochanan said to the Rabbi Yochanan only said one thing. The problem is, since the students weren't paying attention, so therefore you have two Amuraim arguing and saying two different things in the opinion of their rabbi. And by the way, this happens even until today. Many times it happens that we have, unless it's written in a book, right? So says the Gemara, okay? He says like this, Shakish Amar, Shakish is going to say, Lo kanan shiomar ploni ploni yirushu sade ploni to plonit, shenetatim lahem bematana v'yirashum. He says they're not going to acquire until he says ploni uploni, right? This person and this person, they're going to inherit sade ploni to ploni, that I gave it to them as a present, and they're going to inherit it. Beplukta amar Rav Amnuna. So there's actually 3 deot then. Why? Because listen to this machloket. Avam Rav Amnuna says Rav Amnuna, Lo shanu ela v'adam echad v'sadeh echad. We're talking about one person in one field. One person in 2 fields, in 1 field and 2 people, lo. Rav Nachman says even with 1 person in 2 fields, or 1 person and 2 people, 1 field and 2 people, sorry, or 2 people in 2 fields, right? Lo, it's not the halacha. Even in going to be 2 people in 2 fields, meaning you have a 3-way machloket in shitat Rabbi Yochanan. 3-way machloket, okay? So Amad al Shashat, how do I know this? The time was learned in a Braita. Imagine a person comes and he says before his death that he comes and he tells his trusted person, give 1 shekel from my properties to my sons every single week. So it's like like an allowance. So every week he wants to give them a shekel. But really, they need a selah. Don't tell them selah. You give them a selah, right? But if he says but you only give them a shekel, so then you could only give them a shekel. But if they said, if they die, right? 129b, other people are going to inherit instead of them. Whether it said give it or not give it, they're only going to give a shekel. Okay, now here, it's considered like 2 different fields and 2 different people. And we still learned it. So if that's his proof, the proof of Rav Sheshat, that even if it's going to be 2 different fields and 2 different people, you're still going to say the same halacha, according to Rabbi Yochanan. So he asked the question and he answered it. We're talking about that he's still fitting to inherit him. And that's like Rabbi Yochanan Mruka. Remember, according to Rabbi Yochanan Mruka, as long as he's fitting to inherit him, he could change between one boy and another boy. You remember? That's what we said. So that's why you're allowed to say that. So Amar Ravashi says, Tashema, I'm going to bring another proof now. Imagine a person comes and he does like this. When he's going to die, he wants that his properties are going to go to Mr. A. But after Mr. A, it's going to go to Mr. B. Usually it gets cut off, meaning the person usually says after he dies, his properties are going to go to Mr. A. And then that's it. And then that person, he's got his own will. And then it continue. Yeah, exactly. Here, no. Here, it was going to Mr. A. And after Mr. A dies, it's going to go to Mr. B. Okay? And afterwards, the third person. The second person, the first person dies. The second one acquires it. The second person dies, the third one acquires it. What happens if the second guy dies before the first person dies? Remember, there are 3 people. It's supposed to go to Mr. A, B, and C. Mr. B died before Mr. E. So it goes back to the first one. Because basically, since he made the stipulation that it has to go from Mr. A to B to C, since B died before A died, it goes back to the first one. It doesn't go to the third one because there was a break in the chain. So it doesn't go to the third one, it goes back upwards. So he says, here, it's like shte sadot u'shnei bnei adam nami. It's like 2 sadot and 2 people. Uktani, and we learned that you're going to acquire it. Now, v'chitim, and now you're going to tell me achanami that, yeah, Ra'ul Yoshua, you're fitting to inherit it. And it's according to Yochanan Mruka. Yachi, if so, meta shani kanash l'shi. So 1 second. Why do you say that if the second person dies, the third one acquires it? Why? In front of Yochanan Mruka, says the second person never inherits it. Because since the first person could have inherited it, the second person is nothing. Meaning Mr. B has nothing to do with Mr. A yet. So therefore it goes everything to the first one. It doesn't go to the second one. It's only matana, it's not Yerusha. Yerusha en la hefsek. There's no hefsek, there's no pasek in a Yerusha. It goes down. So tiyuvta dekulu. This is a question against all of them. So tiyuvta be'emet is a good question against all these shitot. So lema nami tiyavta tiyuvta Rish Lakish. So ask the Gemara, why isn't that a question against Rish Lakish as well? So says the Gemara, are you going to say it's logical? V'amarava the lechazak Rish Lakish in these three halachot, and therefore obviously it's not going to be a tiyuvta against Rish Lakish. So says the Gemara, lakash. It's not a question. It all depends how he said it. Many times it depends when you say it right away or not. There's such a concept of tokeh de dibur or not. For example, I'm going to come and I'm going to tell you something, and all of a sudden a day later I come and I say I'm going to tell you something else. It's a change in opinion. It's a change of my mindset. Not always is it tofes. It doesn't always hold. But if I told it to you immediately, tokeh de dibur, meaning within the same time, it's an extension of my words. And therefore, even though I told you something, it's like amendment. Exactly. It's an amendment which is done. I cannot change what I told you beforehand. But all of a sudden, once I tell you in such a form, it's something that what is halacha? Remember, anytime that it's tokeh de dibur, it's like dibur, except for avodah zarah. Which means if you were makseh something for avodah zarah, you cannot retract. There's a second that you say that it's going to be for avodah zarah, kaddish. There's nothing you can't retract for avodah zarah or kiddushin. If you come and you got married to a woman in front of witnesses, even within tokeh de dibur, you come and you retract, she's mekudeshet. She's married. Was the second you gave her the kiddushin? That's it. So to do with kiddushin, marriage, and avodah zarah, there's no retracting, even if it was within the 2 or 3 seconds. Everything else,